Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? I don't know if you can relate to this, but I ran into this reservation or concern once I decided that I wanted to become successful. And for sake of argument here, I'm defining success as one, not working for somebody else because that sucks. And two, making enough money doing what you're doing by yourself that you can support your life and your lifestyle. Nothing extravagant unless you want it to be, but just so you can support your lifestyle doing what you're doing. And what I ran into was most of the people that I know or know of that are successful tend to be assholes. And I didn't want to be like that. It's funny because if you ask most people, what does it take to become successful? What do these people have that you don't have? They'll generally say they must be smarter than average. But that's not what I thought ever. My answer has always been, well, they tend to be jerks and morally compromised, and that might be what it takes to become successful. It's interesting because I watched this other great YouTube channel called According to Nicole, and she presented some studies or the results of some studies where you're asking the question, okay, do you have to be a jerk to become successful, or does becoming successful make you a jerk? And the interesting answer was yes. On average, people that are jerks tend to become more successful. However, becoming successful or rich tends to make people bigger jerks. So it's a bit of both. And, on my observations, there are stereotypes exist for a reason. Some stereotypes are just stupid, but very often there's a bit of truth in stereotypes. And there is a correlation between success and a lack of ethics. The capitalist system, if you will, rewards being morally ambiguous. It rewards pushing people out of the way. It doesn't reward ethics very much. It doesn't reward the slow growth. It doesn't reward doing things the right way. It rewards doing things in a way that gets you growth fast, that pushes other people out of your way. You don't have to be talented. You have to be cold. You have to be driven. Those kind of things tend to work, especially in the short term. And that's not something I wanted to do. And you hear all kinds of advice on YouTube, which gets really, really close to that. You have to be super driven. You have to, all the stuff. And the other thing I saw that I've always hated is this split between what I'm going to call the visionary and the engineer. There's history of all these corporate heads like Henry Ford or Elon Musk or you name them, or Thomas Edison, and they're seen as these wonderful people that invented these things, which they did not invent. They merely yelled at people, the engineers, until they invented it. And so the people that are actually doing the work, the creative work, aren't getting the credit, which I don't think is very awesome. And also, a lot of times they're pushed to make something that is not quite ready. And can you say like Microsoft updates, all that kind of stuff? Because the visionary says, get it out there right now. And so people are forced to cut corners. And that's something I did not want to do. I did not want to sacrifice truth for the sake of narrative, if you will. And there's another trap I didn't want to fall into, and that's what I'm going to call the focus trap. And I watched a video by Ali Abdaal not so long ago where he talked about the idea that the requirement for being rich or getting rich is to have an unhealthy obsession with getting rich. And while I understand the sentiment, and I've certainly had focus in other areas of my life which were very instrumental to getting where I got, I didn't want to have this unhealthy obsession with becoming successful where it pushed everything else out of my life. I didn't want to push my girlfriend Susan out and my children and my grandchildren and in my focus on recovery and all the other things that are important to me. I didn't want to become a one-dimensional person, especially because you can get into this obsession. And first of all, you can also become really myopic and not be open to the influence or suggestions of other people. And very often, very focused or very successful people get like that, and they end up missing the boat. There's lots of stories of companies and corporations that went really well for a while, and then they didn't change gears and react to what was happening because the visionaries were so focused and they stopped listening to input from the real world. But there's this other thing, this obsession versus wholeness. And I have a very good friend who I was in a band with, and his dad, great guy, millionaire, had a lot of successful businesses. He had retired. I went to a party a couple of years ago, I think it was now, and I was talking to him, and I was asking him, what is it like being retired now? And he said, I missed the chase. He goes, I didn't need the money. I didn't need the money for a long time, but it's very difficult to give that chase up for the next deal. And I didn't want to become one of those people. And you see it happen all the time, that they get what they were after. And then it's like, well, I got to do a little bit more and a little bit more. And when does it actually ever end? Because I want to have a whole life. I want the success I talked about in the beginning of this video to serve my life, not to become my life. And, that's a trap I didn't want to fall into. And so at the end of the day, I decided I'm going to refuse to become the monster that I hate. I don't want to become one of those people. And I'm not going to be, one of the hustlers and be a member of the bro culture and the hustle culture. I didn't want to become obsessive just to earn the right to rest. I didn't want to become manipulative just to, be heard. I didn't want to push other people aside and treat them as assets rather than as human beings. I didn't want to take, the credit for things that I didn't do. And I wanted to build something that was human and not this monster, or turn into this monster success-seeking person. And I wanted a more of an archetype, if you will, of like truth and clarity and collaboration. I'd rather grow slow and do it right. And I don't just mean right in terms of like, well, you do this the right way, so you'll have this thing set up forever, son. I mean, I wanted to do it right ethically. I wanted to be able to sleep at night. I wanted to still look in the mirror and recognize Ivan and not some other person. I didn't want to just escape the 9 to 5. I wanted something that could maybe like help free other people too. And like I wanted contact with me to produce good things for other people and not to be a blight upon society and just a miserable bastard. And so, there are things that I, really think are important, like sharing credit often and publicly, like saying, I heard this on this other person's YouTube channel. I did not make this up. I wanted to choose long-term sustainability over short-term growth, even if that meant that it's going to take a long time to get anywhere. Even if, because I'm not willing to cut corners and I'm not willing to do things that don't feel aligned with who I am. I wanted to prioritize transparency over image. Can you imagine me having an image anyway? But you know what I mean? I wanted to be upfront about everything I was doing. I wanted to build around values and not chase trends. Because you can chase trends all you want, but it wouldn't be authentic. It wouldn't be me. And not just authentic like, I don't like this thing. It's like, no, but that's not morally me. I want to be able to sleep at night. I want to be able to lead with questions and not declarations. Yes, there are things I stand for, but I wanted to talk to people and get their input. I wanted to protect my time. Because very often when you're chasing something like success, you need to curate who you spend a lot of time with. I certainly had to do that in recovery because there were people that were going to be helpful for that and not. But I didn't want to simply sell my soul going after success and cutting people out of my life, just because they weren't useful to me. Because that's treating people like assets. And that's something I did in active addiction. I treated people either like assets or liabilities. You either have something for me or you're in my way. I don't want to become that person again, especially when I'm chasing something that's just going to be good for me. I don't want to ruin it and sully it by, being a parasite and being somebody that, just treats other people like pawns. That's ugly. We see evidence of that all over the place. I didn't want to become that guy. I wanted to treat people like collaborators, and I wanted to keep my empathy intact, above everything else. That's my compass. It's not a weakness. And very often we're told that empathy is a weakness. And that, my friends, is bullshit. Empathy is one of the greatest tools we have as human beings. And I wanted to be able to, be somebody that was worth being around and worth being. I want to build a life, not just a success, not just a business. The cost of selling our souls for success is way, way too high. And so maybe it's a more difficult path. Maybe it's a slower path, but we're not playing the same rigged game. We're playing it with honesty and integrity. And to me, that's really, really important. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is that what you're doing? Is this something that's holding you back? Or is the preconceived notion that you're going to have to be a jerk to become successful holding you back from doing something? I'd love to hear about it. And of course, as always, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't, because that really helps me out, and make a comment. I'd like to hear from you. Take it easy, kids. Bye.